Hi and welcome to another chess video. I am Vidit in Hoogovens from Iceland. We're going to continue to look at games from the Tata Steel Chess Masters. And yeah, round 7. As I'm recording this, we still have 2 unfinished games. But I want to look at the game of the world champion, Magnus Carlsen. He is in a group of 4 players that were leading before this round. It was Magnus, Giri, Nepomniachtchi and Anand, all on +2. And yeah, we're going to look at Magnus' game. He had the black pieces and he's playing against the Russian Vladimir Fedoseev. Now Vladimir plays d4, and yeah, all of the games in the World Championship match featured e4, c5, the Sicilian, so we didn't really get to see what Magnus had in mind against d4 in the World Championship preparation. But we go for g6 here. Okay, this could be King's Indian or Grunfeld, but after pawn to d5 we have a Grunfeld, so not sure if this was the preparation. Well, possible, either that or the Queen's Gambit declined, but nonetheless the game is Grunfeld. Fedoseev plays knight f3, bishop g7, and now the move h4, which is a relatively new move in theory. I think, yeah, probably this was played first seriously this century, and I believe at first people felt like this should be punished and we're playing moves like c5 here. It's possible that knight f3 is not included, that knight f3 bishop g7 is not in this main line, but c5 sort of attacks the center and black feels that white should be punished for this move, which doesn't, kind of breaks opening principles, but it's a very concrete move. The idea, of course, is just to push the pawn, and the knight can't take because it's controlling the d5 pawn. But Carlsen just fortifies the pawn with c6, so now he doesn't have to worry about h5. And it's sort of the it's sort of white's turn to prove that this pawn does belong there, because the pawn doesn't come back, and in some cases maybe you would like it to be on h3 instead of h4. Black will always have the g4 square, so if you're not getting an attack, this could be a liability. But we'll see. Fedoseev takes on d5, bishop to f4, knight c6 and e3. So he wants to play a very solid line here for white. After castles he plays queen to b3, and Carlsen plays knight to a5. This has been played before, as has this, but previously white was playing here queen to b4. But the novelty in this game is bishop takes c4, as played by Fedoseev. Carlsen, of course, took, and now white castled. So this does look a little bit strange with the castling position, but black doesn't really have any great way of taking advantage of, well, either the pawn or the weakness of the g4 square. You can play bishop g4, but I'll just play knight e5, so you didn't really accomplish anything. There's no pin or nothing. So seems like white is getting away with this h4 move. Now Carlsen plays bishop d7. Seems like his idea is to fortify this pawn and expand a little bit on the queen side. However, the computers believe that after knight e5 he should have played bishop e6. If he had gone bishop e6 immediately, maybe a move like knight g5 could be annoying. But after bishop d7, knight e5, you can no longer go to g5, so maybe bishop e6 gains in strength and you're just protecting the pawn, and then you can think about further actions. Seems like after knight e5 as played in the game and b5, that white is getting some pressure against the b5 pawn. He played queen a6 here, but knight takes d7 looks very tempting here. Just take on d7. You have to take on the queen to protect the pawn, and now you can play queen b4. And the fact that black can't put a rook here because of the bishop, and the fact that a6 is always met with a4 seems to undermine these pawns and make them a bit of a target for white. So perhaps this is around here white could have gained an edge. Nonetheless, he's still better here at the queen a6, and black has this problem of defending this pawn. Here Carlsen decides to give up a pawn. He could have done so with b4 as well, and the line would go something like this, maybe queen b6, and trying to get some initiative here with rook to c8. Black has the bishop here, but he is a pawn down. In the game he played queen to c8, but this also leads to some problems at the queen to a5 as played. And again, this is a bit tricky to defend because we can always take here. We have two attackers. You can't go to b8 because of the bishop, and a4 always undermines the pawns. So Carlsen trades queens here, but this allows knight takes d7, and white wins a pawn. So Carlsen is facing some difficulties here. He's down a pawn, but he breaks immediately with e5. Very often in the Grunfeld you will find yourself down a pawn for either an initiative or some kind of compensation. And here black, as so often in the Grunfeld, is counting on the activity of his pieces. Breaks immediately with e5. If you allow white to consolidate, he will just be a pawn up. So black tries to open up the position. The point is trying to use this strong bishop. He currently has control of the file. And now with a knight on e5, maybe you can also play rook here to pressure the pawn on b2 further. Fedoseev plays rook a to c1. He wants to attack the c4 pawn. The knight is kicked back and knight to d3. And now rook c2. It's true that black can take this and inflict double pawns on white, but on the other hand you will lose this one. And let's say you play a move like this, I think, yeah, or here or something. We will take and always just protect the knight. This will be very cozy for white to punish black into the wee hours of the night. So Carlsen doesn't take on f4, he plays rook a to c8, bishop to g5. Note that if you take immediately on c4, we have knight b4, and something similar happens in the game. You have to control the knight. If you go to c1, I can just repeat. But we'll see a similar line in the game. Bishop to g5, rook e8, and now knight takes c4. So first Carlsen pushes the bishop, and now he plays knight b4. It's also an option to take on d3, to take on a2, but Carlsen could also have gone back here. But he takes on a2. And this sort of leads to simplification. Fedoseev attacks the knight, Carlsen takes white's knight, and we have some trades here. And Carlsen decides to get rid of the bishops. Now, white could potentially take on h6, but then black can take on h4. And one less pawn. This will become under attack as compensation for this, so white doesn't want to liquidate too much, so he plays b3, takes on e5, and now takes on a6. So now white has a choice, and he decides to eliminate this pawn, which is much more dangerous than this one, because the b pawn is passed, so of course Carlsen takes that one. So now we have a situation with 4 against 3 on the same wing, and this has a very large drawing tendency if we have one pair of rooks. But here we have 2 pairs of rooks, and that can change things a little bit. But since black can rather easily, it seems, defend the base of his pawns, I'm not sure how white can improve here. He played rook d1, rook b4, rook d7. Carlsen played king g7 because if he takes on h4, you run the risk of losing the f7 pawn. Well, you don't run the risk, you just lose it. And at least white has a pass pawn here. This is as good of a 3 against 2 as you can get with a pass pawn. This pawn, if it was here over here on h3, it's completely different because it's much harder to make a pass pawn that's irrelevant. So king g7, rook a to a7, rook to f5. So Carlsen is defending, and how does white improve? He decides on f3, starts pushing the pawns. And here a rather interesting moment, rook e7 by Fedoseev, and Carlsen allows him to play e6, which looks very dangerous because, well, it's a pin, we're attacking this guy, and we can't take because of the pin, the rook will simply take. So it looks like a problem, but I think Carlsen had everything worked out here. He played king to f8. Now we're threatening to take on e6, so you have to take on f7. Can't take with a pawn because that exposes your rook on e7. So you take with the rook. Rook takes, and yeah, here we have a choice, rook takes or pawn takes. In the game, white played rook takes f7. However, if you take with a pawn, I don't see how you improve. If black plays h5 here, avoiding white playing h5 would create some weaknesses to attack. I don't see how you improve. Let's say we bring the king, black just keeps the rook here on the second, attacking this guy. So whenever the king starts to run, we just take on g2, and if you come closer, I will attack your f pawn. And something like this is a cool line. We can play rook f6 because of the stalemate, and once you take on h5, this is a dead draw. So Fedoseev took with the rook on f7, and well, he's currently up 2 pawns, but how does he improve? Well, the first problem is you have to attend to this pawn. And how do you do that? If you play rook here, I'll play king g7. You have nothing better than to come back, and how do you protect the pawn? In the game he played rook to e7, but king f8 attacks the rook, and now you have to give check if you don't want to lose the pawn on e6. So rook f7, king g8, and Fedoseev went with h5 here. So he wants to trade the e pawn for the h pawn, and he manages to do that after g takes, rook f5, and rook takes f5. Yeah, so he really changed the h pawn for the g pawn, and at least got a pass pawn. But it's only 2 against 1, and an f pawn is not as good as an e pawn in the 3 against 2 that we had earlier, and this is more or less an easy draw for the world champion. Gives a check. Let's just look at the moves here. He plays rook g1, and it's very hard for white to activate the king because black can counterattack these pawns as he does here. The king has to defend, and now rook e1, blocking the king. So switches between attacking the pawns, blocking the king, and there's no real way to make progress. Okay, he had to go to a7 because otherwise rook e7 check and the king might penetrate, but Carlsen doesn't fail in doing that. Rook check, rook e7, the king goes to d4. It could go to f3, but then I mean rook e1 probably repeats a position from before, so king d4 is a try, but here actually he has to after king d5 give up the g pawn, and now it's a dead draw. Rook takes g4, rook d7, king g8, f5, rook to f4 behind the pawn, and here simply rook f1, and on rook check, which white played, we go to the short side, king to h7, and Fedoseev didn't bother here. He just made some checks, and a draw was agreed. So yeah, a rough game for the world champion. He had to really defend their pawn down, but as so often he showed his endgame class and his defensive skills and managed to hold on to the draw. So Magnus still doing pretty good on +2, but he could move down to second place if some of the guys on 4 points manage to win, which is very much a possibility as I am recording this. But I will see you later in another video. For now, subscribe if you haven't. Another video up there, probably a game from this tournament, and I'll see you later. Bye bye.